Hi, I'm Chanda Masta. I'm the Serious Blonde. You're watching The Accidental Activist. Tonight, I'm excited to have my friend and guest, Jason Call. He is running for Congress in Washington State, Washington District 2. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Chanda. I'm so excited to be here on this show with you today.
Thank you so much
Really a
for coming
pleasure.
on. You're one of my first few guests, so I'm excited to be able to talk to you. My impressions of you when I first met you are, wow, that's a true activist. I really, not being an activist and looking up to you guys like, okay, that's how you do it. So I'm excited to hear your story. But first, I want to let people kind of know just what you've been up to the last, 6 months, 8 months. So I want to roll this TYT clip with you and Jink Uger.
Roll tape.
Thank you.
Jason Call's in the studio. He's a congressional candidate in Washington's 2nd District. Jason, welcome to the program, brother.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Okay. So, Jason, we already have a Democrat in the district that you're running in.
No, we don't. But go ahead.
Okay, all right. What's the situation? Who's the incumbent?
His name's Rick Larson. He's been there for 20 years. I believe he's running for his 11th term. He's a very conservative Democrat. He's part of this New Democrat coalition. He takes a ton of corporate PAC money from the industries that are killing the planet and killing the economy. And I think people are really ready to see change.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I hear from Washington media and Washington Democrats that money doesn't corrupt people, and that those corporations are giving for their health and for your health.
Right.
So I'm sure that's how much money has he taken?
Over the 20 years, he's taken $14.5 million over 20 years, and 75% of that has been corporate PAC money.
Okay, but those corporations, they were probably giving it to him. What do you think? Was it for charity?
I think they want to give him charity. I think they want to see him reelected, but they're not doing it for the constituents of the district. No.
Yeah, because there's one thing about corporations, they don't care about making money at all.
Not at all.
Yeah, they've never cared about it, and so that's why they give $14.5 million to Democrats. Now, are you going to sit here and tell me that he sometimes voted with those corporations?
He has more than sometimes voted with those corporations. In fact, many of the votes that he has taken that I'm trying to hold him accountable for actually were with the Republicans when the Democrats actually opposed. For instance, he's working on deregulating the banks. He's voted in favor of the wealthy on estate tax issues. The corporations are getting their money's worth out of purchasing his seat.
Okay, so Jason.
Wow. It sounds like you've got a real David versus Goliath type of battle going on.
It is, we're running a no corporate PAC money campaign, but I can't tell you how much fun I had sitting in the studio with Cenk in that interview. And it was only, I think the whole interview was only about 11 and a half, 12 minutes long. And it felt like I was in and out of there in like 3 minutes. And there was so much more I wanted to say. But if you watch the whole video, I watched it back and I was like, wow, that was good. That was a really good spot. So I was very excited about that. That was a good time.
You did an excellent job. You did an excellent job. I was so impressed with it, like, oh, yay, one of our own is making it. So before we get into, your fight against the corporations and the wall of greed, I want to talk to you about how you got here. How did you grow up? Did you grow up locally here in Washington State?
Well, yes and no. I was born in Southern California. My dad was military. He got restationed, Air Force. He got restationed in England. My mother was British. And so when he took us over, we moved over to England when I was a year old and stayed there until I was 11. My dad actually turned down commissions as a military officer because he wanted my sisters and I had two younger sisters, to grow up in the same area and not to have that sort of instability that comes from moving around every 2 years, as many military families do. So I grew up in England until the age of 11. My dad was homesick. We moved back over here. And so in 1982, we moved back. And in 1983, we ended up here in Washington. My grandparents had ties to the Tacoma area. And so I spent my junior high from like 6th grade to high school in Pierce County, in South Pierce County, in Graham, which is well, I don't need to go. It's a very rural area.
Right.
So went to school out there. From there, I went to the University of Washington
Well,
for
so who was Jason Cole in high school?
okay, you're gonna laugh at this.
No, I
So
won't.
my dad was a Reagan Republican, and I think one of the things about your politics when you are that age is your politics primarily come from your parents.
Exactly.
So I actually in high school had a Bush Quail sign in the back of my car.
No way.
I freely admit it. But here's the thing: is I grew up in an area where I did not have exposure to different ethnicities. It was extremely white. I think the students that I went to through junior high were probably 99% white. And when I went to high school, I ended up going to from out in South Pierce County. I commuted about 25 miles every day. It's the only reason my parents got me a car. I went to an honors program in Tacoma, and there I was introduced to people of many other cultures because Tacoma is a very multi-ethnic
Yeah.
city.
Yeah. I grew up in Belfair, so I get it. We were
Yeah.
rural too. So what did you aspire to be in high school? What did you think you would grow up to be?
Well, I always wanted to be a veterinarian. And so I actually went to college. My first year, I was in the biochem sequence at the University of Washington. And I ended up not continuing that because I ended up working for a veterinary office. I got a job as a kennel tech and a vet tech. And I realized that I got far too emotionally attached to the animals.
Right.
And so I still remember to this day, and this was 30 years ago, animals that we had coming in for various ailments that would die. And I had to hold animals that were being brought in, that their
Oh,
owners were euthanizing them,
yeah.
and animals that we had worked on in surgery and that I had gotten to know over the course of
Right.
weeks who ended up dying on you. And I said, man, I can't, this is rough. This is rough. And so,
Yeah.
just
That's sad.
people who do that as a healthcare
I worked in a
professional.
nursing home and I felt the same way. I would get attached to my residents and then I'd watch them
Yeah,
die.
and it was hard. And so I realized that wasn't for me. And so I changed my major a couple of times, went through civil engineering, went through I couldn't code for anything. And so I realized civil engineering was not for me. Thought about education, ended up with a political science degree, which did me absolutely no good except to say I got very involved in understanding politics and political systems, and probably is what prompted me to be where I am right now. But in terms of my career, I ended up being a high school math teacher. So
And how did that work out for you? I mean, did you have to take out student loans and grants, and
I have to
how
say,
bad in debt did you go?
I didn't. I was very fortunate. Now we're talking about I entered college in 1989, where the costs of tuition and housing, especially for in-state, University of Washington were in-state, were not exorbitant the way they are right now. I think a year of college for me was about 10 grand. And I'm very fortunate that my father paid for my college. When I switched my major to education, he said, I'm not paying for that. That's actually why I switched out of education. He says, I'm not going to pay for you to get an education degree. He said, the public
Oh,
education
that's a
style.
Republican response.
There you go. I mean, he was a Reagan Republican, and he had done some substitute teaching for a while, which was a terrible job for him. He'd come home every day just mad as hell, and so but he said, I'm not going to pay for you to be a teacher. Public education's terrible, but he was okay with me being political science. So that's what I ended up with. And I had a great time in the political science department. I absolutely love history and politics. And
Yeah, right. I
that kind of
think a
stuff.
lot of us do. I really do.
Yeah.
So you can see on the slide deck, we have one of your pictures of you protesting.
Yep. And I think I've got my daughter in my backpack right there. I want to say she was 2 years old at the time, and I'm not sure if that was a protest march either right around the time we went to Iraq. Actually, this would have been about a year or two after, because I protested. I marched on February 15th, 2003. It was that what they called the day the world said no to war, and
Yeah.
all over the world, in New York and London and Rome, millions of people got out to protest this impending invasion that the Bush administration was going to do. And so my daughter was not born. My ex-wife at the time was 8 months pregnant with her when we did that march from the Seattle Federal Building down to the INS building. And I marched to protest the ongoing invasion for years and years and years on the anniversary after that. So that was probably 2005.
Wow.
We were doing that anniversary march, that picture there.
That's awesome. I actually was one of the asleep people that was driving by you guys going, what are all those people doing?
Yeah.
You know, I do remember that. I do remember that day, and I remember the people coming out. And, you know, I think as a regular, just asleep American who was watching MSNBC back then, I agreed with you guys. I didn't think that we should be going to war, but I was also eating the propaganda from the war machine. Hey, they bad, somebody attacked us, we got to fight back, you know, like so many did. So any campaigns that really stuck out to you back in those days that you were fighting hard for?
Well, I worked for as a volunteer. This is all volunteer. I've never been paid campaign staff, but I volunteered for Howard Dean's campaign when he was out of the race. You know, I was so upset by the re-election of George Bush that I ended up leaving the country. I actually went to go teach in Cairo, Egypt. I sold my house. I sold all of my belongings. I took my family, my 2 kids who were very young at the time, and we went to live in Cairo because I had, as an activist, you get very worked up about these things, and I had to separate, you know. So I quit the best teaching job I have ever had. I was there 7 years at Kamiak High School in Mukilteo. I loved that job. I loved that school. I loved those kids, and I loved teaching what I was teaching. I was teaching AP statistics and pre-calculus, which are just my bread and butter as a math teacher. But my own comfort in that job, and well paid and union wages, was not as important as me sort of for my own mental health, needing to separate from America. I learned a lot on that trip. Going to live in a developing country that is extremely polluted. In fact, we came back because it was so polluted and the pollution was affecting our kids. I said,
how's the politics there? Do they have lots of parties where we only have 2?
God. So it's under Mubarak, it was an authoritarian government. We were told, be very careful about what you say. You don't have freedom of speech. You know, it seems like the whole country operates on what's called bakshish, which is basically bribes. You know,
right.
Yeah. You grease everybody's palm. I thought it was awful. I was terrible at going to the bazaar and sort of haggling, and haggling is part of the thing. And I couldn't do it. I was like, all right, you want me to pay that much money? I'll pay that much money. If you don't want me to pay that much money, I'm not going to pay that much money. Right. I didn't want to go through this this ritual.
Just tell me how much it is. I don't care.
Just tell me what I need to pay.
That's hilarious.
In fact, that reminds me of the Life of Brian clip where they were haggling over the gourd. I saw that. I was like, man, that is so true. That's exactly what it's like.
Oh, that's funny. But you know, I've traveled a lot and I've lived in a lot of places, and it really changes your perspective on everything when you absorb other cultures. It really does.
And I came back to the United States wanting to fight harder for our rights here. You know, I came back with an appreciation of what we had, because we do have more freedom than a lot of places around the world. But I came back wanting to fight harder because in this country where we should have great democracy, I mean, the reality is we don't. We could do things so much better. And I came back with a sort of a heightened sense of wanting to be an activist and to fight for the working class and fight for the environment. And, you know, the pollution in Cairo is horrendous. There are almost no environment. I was there for 3 weeks and I felt like I'd been smoking, you know, a pack a day for years. Right. That's how bad the pollution is over there. And I came back saying, we can't let things get like that here. Right. You know, this is what happens when you have no regulation and when you have corporations running everything, you know, and they're an extremely stratified country in terms of income inequality. You have some very, very, very wealthy people in the school that I taught in Cairo, teaching math, English. They spoke fluent English and fluent French, but their parents were all diplomats, bankers. They were all, you know, very wealthy people, where you go out onto the street and people there are just dirt poor.
Right,
The
right.
average population is absolutely dirt poor. And I said, we can't let that happen in this country. And if we don't get a handle on things, we could be there. I mean,
Right.
people think things can't get worse, but things can get worse if you don't pay attention.
And they are getting worse, and we know
And
that.
they are.
So did you have like one defining moment in life that just like, okay, that's it, I've had it, I'm going out there to fight? Was it the Bush war? Was it the Cairo pollution?
Yeah, it probably was the invasion of Iraq in 2003. I was down in Westlake in Seattle. It seemed like every weekend in 2003 and 2004 with some protest action. I remember doing marching for the Answer Coalition in support of Palestinian rights. And yeah, I would have to say that that's really where I got,
that's where you got started.
super engaged in wanting to fight for, I used to go out here in Mukilteo. We used to go to a park, and we would set up crosses with Veterans for Peace. We would do these sort of these mass graveyards, and I remember at the point where we set up 1,500 crosses in a park overlooking the Puget Sound, and it was horrendous. You step back at that and you look at 1,500
Right.
deaths, and we would just see the death totals up and up and up. And then I used to sit. I painted. I wish I had a photograph of this. I have one somewhere. I painted this sign. That's where we got to about 2,300 deaths, and it was just on a piece of plywood, and I painted 2,300 U.S. troops, Cheney, 5 deferments, or whatever it was,
Right.
or whatever
Right.
his statement about why he was never able to go to war. And I used to sit at the freeway overpass at 164th Street in Linwood for hours at a time, just holding this sign, feeling like I had to get people's attention about how bad this was. And
Right.
my wife at the time, she thought I was out of my mind.
Right. I sent my my fiance at the time to Iraq through Halliburton. He went with the subsidiary, and he was over there for 3 years being a paid subcontractor. So, I mean, it was affecting all of our lives, whether we knew it or not. And to see that many, I mean, when you see the death toll number on TV, it's just a number, right? But for you to see every one of those crosses, it's like with the nurses putting the shoes out, that really just makes such an impact where a number doesn't.
Yep.
That is so. How did you move from activism to politics?
Well,
They go hand in hand, I think, but
they do. And so I kind of, in 2008, when we came back from Egypt, we moved to here in Marysville, where I live right now, and I got a job teaching with Marysville School District. And I decided that I was going to get more involved with my local legislative district. And so I did this file for PCO thing, which wasn't nearly as big of a deal as it is right now. I was just like, all right, I'm gonna sign up to be this PCO, voting power in your district. But things were very much on a local level. We were also happy that Obama had been elected.
right. I was gonna say those were Obama days, right?
Those were Obama days, and I busted my ass for Obama. I mean, it was so important for me to prevent John McCain and Sarah Palin from being in the White House.
Right.
We can't have more warmongers. And
Did you have that warm Obama feeling, like, yay, we've actually punched through and everything's going to be so good now?
Yep, I cried. The night he got elected, I shed tears.
And so when did you wake up to the reality of Obama?
About 2 years later,
Right.
when they took the public option off the table, and
Yep.
forced us into the ACA, I was like, oh, this is not going as I expected.
Right,
And
right.
then continuations of wars, the TARP bailout, of course. I was very lucky in that I bought the house that I live in right now. I'm sitting in my house right now. I bought my house and got a loan for my house 2 days before the TARP legislation was passed. And
What
then they
year was
locked
that?
everything down, and then they weren't giving
2009?
anybody else loans. Huh?
What year was that? 2009?
2008. It was. I
2008,
bought
okay.
my house September 15th, I think, And then the TARP legislation was passed on September 17th. I'm not sure if I have my days exactly correct, but that's what it
Right.
was. And so I'm lucky I'm in the house, and I've been in this house. I'm not letting go of this house for anything.
Right.
But that's how, I feel extremely lucky that, I was in a position with my teaching job where I could afford to get this house and get the loan. I don't think we would have gotten the loan after the TARP legislation had passed, but we paid a
Exactly.
high interest rate. And as soon as that TARP legislation passed and the economy went into recession, I lost $100,000 in my house almost overnight. But I was like, whatever, I got a house.
Right. Right. I lost my whole entire retirement in 2008. Yeah.
Oh
So
yeah,
many
and I
of
lost
us
a
did.
ton of my retirement too. Yep.
Yep. So many of us did. So have you had any fights on the activism front that you feel like you've had victories?
Well, I mean, I think every day that you can keep fighting is a victory, to tell you the truth.
Right. No, I hear you.
Every day that you don't say, can I curse? Am
Yeah.
I allowed to curse? Are we okay?
Are we demonetized?
No, I don't know. Every day that you don't say, screw this, I'm walking away. I can't deal with this anymore, because being an activist is emotionally exhausting.
Yes, it is.
You invest your heart and soul into fighting for these causes. And as you probably know, progressive causes are all intertwined. That's one of the things that I love about the progressive movement, is that there's not just one issue. Homelessness, healthcare, wages, military spending, all of these things are connected to each other. So when people say, well, what's the most important thing to fight for? I don't even know how to answer that question. I always say healthcare and environment. Healthcare is our biggest national crisis. Environment is our biggest global crisis. But I can't even really compare the two.
Right.
We've got to get them both done.
I just say justice, medical justice,
Yeah, justice, and getting money out of politics. How do you not do one without really taking on the whole package?
Right.
And so it's exhausting as hell doing this. It really is. And
Right.
you know that.
So you've progressed naturally to running for office. Aj, you want to cue up Jason's campaign video? I figure we'll go into that and then we can talk after that.
Sure.
After my mom's surgery, as she was being prepped for discharge, she could already feel something was wrong. She told the doctor she needed to stay longer for observation, but the insurance company would only cover one night's recovery in the hospital. My mom eventually died as a result of the infection she got from that surgery. An infection that could have been caught and cured had she remained in the hospital for one more day. And do you know what the saddest part is? This is not a unique story in our country. Everyone I know has a friend or a family member with a story just like my mom's. Everyone has a story. My name is Jason Call. I've been an organizer and progressive activist for 30 years, and I taught in our public schools for nearly 2 decades. I've been confronting special interests and standing up for what is right my entire life. I've lived in Everett and Marysville for the last 20 years, so I know we're tired of the inaction from our current corporate representation. It's time for a change. Medical bills have become the #1 cause of bankruptcy for Americans. The cost of housing keeps rising while our wages remain stagnant. The climate crisis threatens the livelihood of our children and grandchildren. And here in the North Puget Sound region, the Navy growlers have caused an extreme level of disruption and pollution to residents and wildlife. We deserve a representative who will put our interests before their corporate donors. That's why I'm running for Congress. Our opponent gets paid a lot of money to avoid these problems, thanks to connections from his time as a lobbyist. He's not listening to our concerns and doesn't even live in the state of Washington. It's time working class people like you and me took our government back from the grips of corporate money and special interests. We need Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, criminal justice reform, tuition-free college, a guaranteed job with a living wage, and affordable housing for everyone. Washington is known to be a progressive leader in our nation. So why doesn't our representation share these progressive values? This is a choice between 2 futures. One where corporations will continue to reap huge profits by ignoring the climate emergency and denying people their right to health care and a living wage, or a vastly different future. One where billionaires pay their fair share in taxes, where our government isn't sold to the highest bidder, and where our children can grow up without poisoned food, water, and air. From Linwood to Oak Harbor to Bellingham, we have to be courageous and ambitious enough to meet this moment with everything we've got. It's time to send someone to Congress who will represent our story. Visit callforcongress.com today and join our movement.
Great video, Jason. I want to roll into, I know that you've ran for lower offices before, right? You were our state committeeman and for Washington State.
Within the Democratic Party, I was elected in 2016 to represent Snohomish County on the state committee, and I currently represent the 44th legislative district on the Washington State Democrat State Committee. So that's elected office, but it's only sort of within the Democratic Party.
But you had to campaign, and you had to go through the vetting, and you had to go through endorsements, and you had to jump through all the hoops, right?
Yeah, and I also ran for Marysville City Council in 2017. It was a three-way race. I did come in third. We're a very red city here, but I did get 28.5% of the vote, which I thought was pretty good for their first run, and learned a lot of things about campaigning and what to do right and what not to do.
Right. Yeah. What not to do. That's the first things we learned. So obviously you are up against one of the biggest fat cats. This guy, he's not in my district, but he's close enough to where his decisions are affecting my district. And so why don't you give us a little rundown of how bad this guy really is?
Well, the interesting thing about Rick Larsen is that he's in Congress. He's a relative nobody. I mean, the only leadership position he holds is that he's the chair of the aviation subcommittee of transportation. So he's not really high up there in terms of leadership, but he's seeking a 10th term. I got that correct with Cenk. I said he was seeking an 11th term, but he's seeking a 10th term. And to put that in context, he was elected when Bill Clinton was still president. And so he's been here for a long time. He has gotten increasingly more corporate, especially since Citizens United. I mean, his fossil fuel donations have tripled, and you look year after year after year, and you see that gradual incline of donations from these industries. He votes with the Republicans often. Now he'll vote with the Democrats mostly on social issues, but when it comes to the economic issues that affect the working class, he is right in the pockets of corporations. Like I said to Cenk, working on deregulating the banks. He's very tied into the banking industry. In fact, that's where I'll say that I have been a constituent of his. I've lived in Everett and Marysville for 20 years since he was elected. He's been my congressman, barring the time that I left to go to Egypt. He's been my congressman this entire time. And he voted for, I started essentially fighting with him as a citizen when he voted for the 2005 Bankruptcy Reform Act that made it so that if you had student debt, you could never shed that debt through bankruptcy.
Didn't Biden draft that or support it?
That was a Biden bill, but it was a primarily Republican sponsored bill. A lot of Democrats voted. I don't know if it's 60% or 80% of Democrats voted against it, but the small percentage of Democrats who voted for it, Larsen was one of them. So I turn to people who have student debt, and I'll tell you myself, I've got $45,000 of student debt from the master's degree that I got in 2004, that it's going to take me another 15 years to pay that off. But, and I'm not in a position to need to file for bankruptcy. I mean, I'll pay my debts. But for those people who are stuck with tens of thousands of dollars, and it is impacting their daily life paying these bills.
Right. We saw so many stimulus just taken, even my own mother, and, she went to school in the 80s and her student debt is still following her. And because it's compounding
there should be no such thing as student debt. I mean, that's really, I'm a supporter of tuition-free colleges, vocational schools and training for all people who want to do that, who want to better themselves and better their communities. Education is an investment in our future. It's an investment in people, but it's also an investment in our community and our future. And we've got to start making those investments and not making people suffer for wanting to have a better life.
Right. Absolutely. So all of these policies that we fight for on the Bernie Sanders and your platform runs parallel with Bernie's platform for the most part.
Yep.
I don't see any differences anywhere. But how has that changed who you are? If those things were implemented, how would it change your life? How could it have changed your life?
Well, I mean, as you saw in my campaign video, and I got a little bit choked up watching it. So I had to wipe some tears off of my eyes. It's hard to talk about. But we have a for-profit health insurance industry, and that industry killed my mother. She went in for a routine surgery. There was a mishap. You know, I don't blame the doctors for, you know, mistakes that happen, but it was the insurance industry. When she said, I'm not well enough to go home, it was the insurance industry that said, we're only giving you a day, and they sent her home. And as I said in the video, she begged them to keep her there. And so I watched my mother. She was rushed back to the hospital a day after she was sent home. Essentially her intestine, her bowel had ruptured, spilled into her body cavity. You know, they had to induce a coma. I flew down to Albuquerque where she was, and I saw her bloated in an ICU unit on a ventilator.
I'm so sorry. Oh, that's just awful, Jason.
It was terrible, and it all could have been prevented if we didn't have this for-profit insurance system that would have given her a few days more for them to figure out, because, you know, had the rupture occurred in hospital, they would have been right there to fix it.
It's always profits before patients. And that's the problem with the corporate greed that we face and that we fight, because it's not about us, the humans, you know.
No, it's about making money. And we've got to take, you know, there are essential industries that we have got to take the money out of, just for humanity. Healthcare, education, you know, it makes no sense to me that we can look at what has happened here in the last 6 weeks over this COVID pandemic. And first of all, had we had Medicare for all, we would not be facing near the crisis that we're facing right now. People who have been able to get the services they needed, the testing that they needed early. They would have not been afraid to go to the doctor for a cough or whatever. But we have seen the 8 richest men in this country, and they are all men, 8 richest people, all men, increase their net worth by a combined $430 billion over 6 weeks. The richest man in this country has increased his net wealth, Jeff Bezos, $40 plus billion over 6 weeks, on the heels of a crisis. I mean, this is what Naomi Klein wrote about with the shock doctrine and disaster capitalism.
Yeah.
You know, and we're seeing it play out again. And not again, that's the thing that kills me about this, is it's again, we went through this 10 years ago with the bailout of the Great Recession in 2008.
Right,
you know?
Exactly. But Biden won't even talk about it. It's not even a conversation that we're allowed to have with the supposed Democratic candidate, you know?
Yeah.
We'll cover you if you get sick, but if you have a heart attack, you can F off and die, basically.
Pretty much. I mean, we are living in an inhumane country. And, you know, like I said, coming back from Cairo and seeing how bad it is living in a developing country where you don't have access to clean water, where things like hepatitis A and B are endemic. I mean, I had to get typhoid vaccine before I moved over there, you know. But coming back, I looked back at America during that trip, and I said, man, why aren't we doing better than we are? You know, and so I came back just really wanting to fight for everything that we didn't have. Why do we have substandard wages? Why does Flint, Michigan, for Christ's sake, after 5 years not have clean water? How is that possible in this country?
Right, because they're being ignored.
Bezos makes $40 billion in 6 weeks.
Exactly.
I'm furious. You know, that's the thing. I am
And that's just
absolutely
it. I
furious about
love that
this.
we have candidates that are fired up, and I want people to feel that, because we all relate to it, because we all are fighting our own battles somewhere, be it Medicare, be it college tuition, be it owning a home, or even a job with a living wage, immigration. It does, we have so many different fronts. So, you're out there, you're campaigning, your TYT interview was in November, so you've been on the campaign trail for a while. How did COVID change that for you?
Well, it's interesting. The first impact that we had was that we couldn't get the signatures that we needed to be on the ballot. We had actually purposely waited until the Washington presidential primary on March 10th,
Right.
because we said our focus needs to be on Bernie right now. I don't want to tag on to Bernie's campaign. I want to make sure that we get Bernie the win in Washington State. And so we did not go do signature gathering. The only real effort we did at signature gathering was when Bernie came to the Tacoma Dome.
Right.
And so we walked up and down the lines and said, if you're in Congressional District 2, please sign our form. And we needed 1,700 signatures. We probably got about 300 at that event. And so purposely waiting until after March 10th really was a bad idea. I mean,
Well,
nobody could have known.
Nobody could have
because
known, right?
5 days later, you couldn't go outside. And so we petitioned the Secretary of State, can you relieve us of these signature requirements? Well, they didn't. And so we ended up paying the filing fee. And so that was really the first impact. But it's forced us, and we were going to do this anyway, so we feel like we were really well prepared for this. I have a fantastic tech team, and I have a fantastic volunteer team. This is a very difficult time to ask people for money. And so we have been running things as bare bones as we possibly can. We have enough money coming in to keep the lights on, as they say.
Right.
We just did a big sign order, all union printed. We only do union printed materials. And so we just ordered about 800 signs for the district, yard signs and freeway signs. And so next week we're going to start passing those around to the various cities and people in the cities and towns, and we'll start setting those up. But everything has to now go to your social media and your text and phone banking. And I don't even like phone banking because nobody likes to pick up a phone call.
Right.
So, we're really going to focus on text banking. But I have a fantastic tech team. We've purchased the data. I don't know what's going on with it. My tech team knows what they're doing, and they're fantastic people with this. And we have a ton of volunteers who are passionate about our campaign and are emailing me daily. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do to help? So we're going to be fine. And I almost want to say we probably with the people that I have on my team and their understanding of how to do social media targeting, we may even be in a better position than the incumbent to do the outreach that we need. We're certainly targeting all of the community colleges in the area. We've got Western Washington University, bunch of community colleges, WSU branch campus in Everett. And I think college kids are really excited about what we're doing.
Good.
We just got the endorsement of Sunrise Bellingham.
Nice.
Which then allows us to apply for the National Sunrise endorsement, which we're working on.
Right.
We're endorsed by Snohomish County DSA, and so we're working on the National DSA endorsement as well. As you know, we're endorsed by Our Revolution. But we have the tools that we need. I mean, obviously, we need donations. We need to get those grassroots donations. We're all no corporate cash. Larson raises and spends $1 million every cycle.
Right.
But that's just power money right there. That's not. We just need money to get our staff some paychecks and purchase the literature and the signs. And we've got a great team to do it. I'm very excited about our opportunities.
So what's the first event you hope to roll out when the doors open?
You mean when we're actually allowed to get together?
Yeah, when we're allowed to get together. What's your first act?
I would like to have a volunteer party. I would like to go down to I've got a friend who is actually a libertarian, and we don't agree on all political
Right?
issues, but he doesn't like Rick Larson. And I've been a customer of his, Crucible Brewing in Everett. He's a small business. He knows I support small business, and he knows I love his beer. And he's let me use his beer hall as an in-kind contribution. And so as soon as we open up, I want to get all the people who have volunteered for our campaign to come down to Crucible Brewing in Everett, and we're just going to have a big campaign party, and we'll talk about what's next then.
Well, I'm
And
excited for that.
I'm really looking forward to that. And if you're in Everett, Crucible is open, not to drink in, but you can get packaged beer to go. Go get your growlers and growlers filled at Crucible. Dick Mergens is an awesome guy, and I want to promote his business right now.
Support those small businesses. Everybody out there, that's, they need us right now, especially right now. So say this is all done and over with, and we defeat Larson, and the ding dong, the evil king is dead. What is your first act? What are you going to roll in fighting for?
Well, I'm going to sign. I've already said immediately I'm signing on to Medicare for all. I'm 100% supporter of that bill, but I'm going to look, as a supporter of the Green New Deal, I'm going to look to introduce things that we can do immediately. I think one of the things that I'd really like to do, and I want to give a shout out to a guy in my area. His name's Colin Carlson. He works with Wolfpack. He actually ran against Larson in 2018. He chose not to run and support my campaign this time around, but he brought to me, I want a federalized waste management system. Where our waste management is not this is one of those things that should not be a for-profit industry. We're talking about environmental considerations. Recycling is expensive, but we've got to do it. And if you're leaving it to a for-profit company to do recycling, it's not going to happen effectively. So we need to, this is one of those areas where we need the federal government to take the reins here and have that taxpayer investment in what is eventually going to give us a cleaner environment and effective recycling, and do it based on the science rather than the profit. So a federal waste management program is something that I really want to work on. I have had the opportunity to connect with candidates all over the country, and many of them have fantastic ideas. And I think one of the things that I'm most excited about with whoever of these candidates manages to get through their primary and win their seats, we are going to be a unified front, even to the left of the existing Progressive Caucus, that is going to bring these plans to Congress and be ready to drop bills on day one. And I look forward to somebody like Nancy Pelosi. Now, I have to say, I hope she's not in her seat anymore. I hope Shahid Buttar is in that seat. But I look forward to this longstanding Democratic leadership telling new progressives, this isn't how business is done here. And we are going to tell them, this is how business is going to get done now.
We have to change it. We have to change it all. I love that you're rolling out with the policy that somebody, we don't really talk about waste management. It is something that is, I understand that right now, since China's been shut down, most of our recycling is backing up. It's just piling up because we used to ship it over there to be processed. Am I wrong?
Exactly.
It's definitely something that needs to be tackled. Oz, you want to slide through some of our slide deck there? We've been talking. I haven't been going through any of them. Let's check them out and see what's in there. Oh, Jason, addressing.
So I don't know if you wanted me to say something. That's me speaking to the 10th Legislative District Summer Picnic. That was back in September of 2019, just a few short weeks. In fact, it was maybe 2 weeks after I had announced my campaign. That was an event that Larson was at. And if you want, I'll give you a picture on how Larson interacts with his constituents. Up here in this district, we've got a huge problem. And I'm actually over on the peninsula, about the growlers. The Navy growlers.
I live with the growlers every day.
You listen to those growlers. Well, this has been a problem for a decade, and it is really affecting the environment and the quality of life for area residents. Well, at this event, Larson came up and he gave his 5-minute spiel, and it's kind of embarrassing, I have to say, because he's being challenged by me. He's trying to rebrand himself as a grassroots environmentalist. So he comes up and And the sad part about that is he actually has the worst environmental record of all the House Democrats in Washington. It's really kind of pathetic.
But who checks them? Who checks them? The people that
Well,
support them don't go
we
look
are-
on Open Secret or
we are checking.
Good.
So Larson gave his 5 minutes, and somebody called. He walked away from the microphone, but somebody called out from the audience, "What about the growlers?" And Larson took the time to walk back to the microphone and say, "This is not a town hall," and then he walked off.
Right? That's
And
what
I
they
couldn't
always do.
believe how disrespectful
Yeah.
that interaction was, and I swear I wish I'd gotten that on video because I'd
Right.
be blasting it.
Well,
everywhere.
I remember in 2016, I was new to the movement, maybe only a year in, and I really didn't know who Rick Larson was. And this is when we were pressuring the super delegates. Like we still naively
superdelegates.
thought that we could ask them to change their vote and support Bernie,
Yep.
right? And he literally came on Facebook and said, "You guys can F off." And he used the whole word. And I was shocked to see an elected official at that level just cussing out constituents,
Yeah, now I actually went through the Skagit County endorsements interview today, and they said, you maybe have a history of some engagements as an activist. And I said, yes, my engagements as an activist will not quite be the same as my engagements as a congressional representative. I will conduct myself appropriately.
Right.
But
We
as an
wear
activist,
that
I'm on
as
fire.
it's like a dirty badge, like, oh, you were an activist. You're not allowed around the party. Yeah, I
I've
know.
dropped a few
I carry the
F-bombs in my
same thing
time.
too. Yeah. Oh, here's a great picture of you talking to the community,
Yep.
out knocking on doors. How fast things changed. And I love this one. It says, "Everyone I know has a story about a friend or a loved one who didn't receive the care that they needed because their insurance company wouldn't cover it." Boy, isn't that the truth for so many, even
Yep.
if you have insurance, you're still paying outlandish copays. It's something that we don't have no choice. We have to continue to fight. And that's why, I just want to be out here helping tell your story, helping tell everybody's story that's fighting, because we're not fighting because we don't like who's in charge. And we're not fighting because we want to be in charge. We are fighting because our lives depend on it, and our children's lives depend on it, and our neighbors' lives depend on it.
And what you said there is so true. And I think this is what a lot of people who are, more moderate in the Democratic Party, centrist, well, they're right-wing Democrats or they're corporate extremists. I'm just calling them that now.
Right?
These are people who have not, for the most part, struggled.
Right.
There are a lot of, older, mostly white liberals who are comfortable in their housing and they're comfortable in their health care, and they treat the Democratic Party like it's a social club.
Yep.
And so the Bernie activists try to infiltrate, try to get themselves worked into the Democratic Party and pull it back to the FDR principles that it should be active on. And they look at us like, you don't belong here. This is not your party. In fact, I had a woman back in 2 years ago literally scream at me, "This is my party." And I was just like, how can they turn around and then ask for unity when they're
demand unity? They don't ask, they demand it, and they make you sign a paper. They make you say that you will be unified.
And they hate progressives, but they want us to carry their corporate water, and it just drives me nuts.
We do carry the corporate water, but I guess until we either have a third party that actually can come together as a big tent and actually bring all of these de facto groups together, or we can reform the Democratic Party, which I'm still not convinced can actually happen.
Yeah.
We're going to keep fighting though. I support everybody on the inside of the party. This week has been tough. I just recently Dem exited. I am no longer a PCO. I'm done taking the abuse. I took many personal attacks. I've seen the most shadiest of things. The bylaws just rewrote in a heartbeat to change to meet their needs. Yet, when we play by the rules are never good enough. So I finally just said I'm done. And I I feel heartbroken watching all of you candidates, all of the delegates, all of the PCOs in the fight that you're in. And now that we are locked in our homes and we're doing these meetings through Zoom, it was bad enough when we had to go to a gymnasium or a meeting hall to have these legislative meetings and Democratic meetings. But now that we are in Zoom, I just feel like we are so much overpowered by the fact that they are running everything. You know, we don't have structural say over anything. How do you think that's affecting you?
Well, it's interesting because I am actually going through all of the endorsement processes for the 14 counties and legislative districts that are intersectional with Washington's second congressional district. You know, and it depends. You know, some of them are really friendly. The Skagit County Democrats endorsement interview tonight was very friendly. They were very pro the progressive agenda, and I expect to get recommended for their endorsement. Nice. You know, but I was over in the first legislative district, you know, and they hated me. In fact, you know, you want to talk about abuse, you're aware that I was suspended from the state party on false charges. I don't think anybody has been beaten up on more in the Democratic Party than myself.
I know, I have to agree. And I have a lot of respect for the hits that you've taken because I've been there with you taking hits, you know. Yep. But yes, you do a huge service for us, and that's why I support those in the party still fighting just like you. You know, it's important that we get out there, we support these candidates. You know, hit the like button on this, subscribe so you can see other great candidates that we're going to be interviewing. You can keep up on what Jason's doing. Jason is all over Uphill Media. We love Jason. We're always supporting Jason.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any parting words you want to say?
Yeah, I want to say one final thing about my race. We are, there are 8 people filed for my race right now. There's myself and the incumbent on the Democratic side. I am the verified progressive. The incumbent sometimes tries to call him progressive, but he himself progressive, but he's not. And there are 6 Republicans, and all of these Republicans are we've reviewed them all, and none of them have a chance in this district. And they're all, I mean, one of them is down in Olympia protesting the shutdown. And so that's the caliber of Republican. These aren't moderate Republicans.
Well, they'll split the vote between themselves, won't they?
That's exactly right. So this is a D+10 district. And for people who don't know, that means that the Democrat typically wins this district by 10 points. And so I really am looking forward to those Republicans splitting that, 30 or whatever percent of the right-wing vote. And I will I don't expect to get a higher primary total than Larson, but I do expect to be high enough, certainly higher than the Republicans, and that I will be on the general ballot with Rick Larson after the August 4th primary. And I'm excited about that. As I tell people in these endorsement interviews, the voters of this district will have a choice that they have not had in 20 years. And that is between 2 Democrats, one who is verifiably progressive at a time when progressive policy is absolutely vital, running against a guy who has a garbage record. I mean, the reality is not only is corporate money, but even if he wasn't taking corporate money, he is a verifiably garbage legislator. He has passed almost no legislation whatsoever. His record is terrible. I beg him to run on his record because I'm going to destroy him.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm excited about. Put me and him on the ballot after the August 4th primary, and we are going to win this race.
Absolutely. Well, tell people how they can find information on you. Where's your website?
So I see the website in the graphic right there. It's callforcongress.com. Everything is FOR, not the number 4. So callforcongress.com, Facebook, Call for Congress, Twitter, Call for Congress. Come and join our Twitter page. We're almost at 13,000 followers. Nice. And I'm just excited. Sign up to volunteer on my website. We've got a volunteer tab. If you want a deep dive into the corporate money that Rick Larson takes, go to my website, go to Rick's Receipts, and we lay it out for you. I'm just grateful for every little bit of money that comes in, for every volunteer that we have. We're a big team here. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about progressive politics is we have always been a team. I felt like you and I have been on the same team for 5 years. Yeah. Oz, we've been on the same team for 5 years.
Yep.
And I feel like you guys are family, and activists, progressive activists are family. And that is something that I don't believe the centrists have.
Right. And I think that's why, we are going through our struggles, and boy, we were on a high just 2 months ago, right? Last time I saw
Yep.
you, we were at the Tacoma Dome with, thousands and thousands of other people. We were on such a high, but boy, we crashed hard and fast, didn't we?
And we got to pick ourselves up. I mean,
And we
that is
will.
the thing about, we have just got to pick ourselves up, whether you're working within the Democratic Party, outside the Democratic
Yep.
Party. There's always something for progressive activists to be doing and to get involved with. And we stay together as a team.
That's right. Well, Jason Call, my friend, my family, my brother in arms, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. I hope people got a better insight into who Jason is and why he is fighting the good fight for us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And I can't wait to have you come back. When you get your big win, I definitely
Absolutely.
get an interview, right?
I'll come back in August, and we can talk about where we go next and how we win this thing in November.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
We got some good shows coming up. Let's see. Sunday, we've got a excellent interview with one of the Venezuelan embassy protectors. He is filming a documentary on what happened there. Some may remember when Code Pink took the embassy 6 months ago and held it. And we're going to talk about the de facto coups that are happening in Venezuela, along with the military movement to the Caribbean. What's going on in the South? We're going to talk about it. And let's see. Trying to think. We got the Daily Dive coming up. Oz, do you know what's on the lineup for Daily Dive?
Daily Dive tomorrow, since YouTube was down today for many of us in social media. Yeah. We're going to premiere this interview with Jason at 10 a.m. in the Daily Dive slot. And that's if YouTube's back up. And then the Daily Dive, it's Blues Brothers Friday. We're going to try and knock it out of the park with that at noon. And after that, we have the Progressive Party Roundtable with Dave Zuckerman. And that's at 2 p.m. Pacific time. That should be a raucous interview, or not interview, but roundtable. He is going for governor of Vermont. So he's the real deal, just like Jason's the real deal. Saturday, no joke, with the Germans, Marcus and Dennis. And we have part 2 Saturday night of the endorsed candidates, and Rebecca Parsons, Mariana Everson, and who is the third that's going to be on there? I don't
Joshua
Collins. Yes, those 3. So I really hope that especially those who are watching from Washington come in, everywhere, as a matter of fact, because we are not unique as a state. And then, of course, we've got Sunday morning. We have Larry Taylor with PDPR, and that is going to be a particularly good show because Larry Taylor has taken on the mantle of fighting the DNC and the Democratic Party from within. This Sunday's show is going to be the convention corruption and how the rules of democracy are weaponized against convention participants. Now, Larry Taylor is one of the handful of national parliamentarians in this country. So he's not just carrying around a Robert's Rules of Order. The guy is on it.
That's me. I carry one around. Yeah. It sounds like Uphill is just going to have an amazing weekend with a lot of great talented people coming on.
We've got a lot of stuff going on, and we're going to hopefully we're going to have a surprise Saturday night before the town hall. We are looking at an established social media person who speaks truth to power, who may be coming over to Uphill. We'll know Saturday night, and we are going to simulcast that interview where she makes that announcement. So that will be 6:00 p.m. Pacific time. So we're excited to get that bump, that kind of support, because that's what Uphill Media is about. We are about diversified news, and we are just all excited. So that was a mouthful. I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Oz.
And you can
so
go
I just want to cue up our closing song because we're getting to their closing. Jason, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for fighting for all of us. And this song goes out to all of our PCOs, delegates, and candidates that are in the good fight inside the Democratic Party. You are not alone. We are there with you. We support you. We appreciate what you're doing. Keep fighting because it's the only way we're going to get real change. Are we close? There we go.
There we go.
Well, I don't know why I came here tonight. I got the feeling that something ain't right. I'm so scared in case I fall off my chair, and I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Yes, I'm stuck in the middle with you, and I'm wondering what it is I should do. It's so hard to keep the smile from my face. Losing control, yeah, I'm all over the place. Oh, clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Well, you started out with nothing, and you're proud that you're a self-made man. And your friends, they all come crawling, slap you on the back and saying, please, please, oh, please. Trying to make some sense of it all, but I can see that it makes no sense at all. Is it cool to go to sleep on the floor? And I don't think I could take anymore. Oh, clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Oh. Well, you started out with nothing, and you're proud that you're a self-made man. And your friends, they all come crawling, slap you on the back and saying, please, please, oh, please. Well, I don't know why I came here tonight. I got the feeling that something ain't right. I'm so scared in case I fall off my chair, and I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs. Oh, clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Yes, I'm stuck in the middle with you. Oh, stuck in the middle with you. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Thank you.